Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey everybody, welcome to the Figure It Out cast for November 2020. I'm your host, Adam Koralik, and I am once again joined by Rob. Welcome back, Rob.
Welcome back, Adam.
Yeah, to my own podcast. Thank you. Actually, this month at least, it is sort of your podcast. Now, do you want to explain what happened over on Patreon?
So last month we made the announcement that since there was a nice outpouring of support for me staying on the podcast, that we decided to offer the chance to make it a permanent thing by adding a stretch goal to your Patreon page, that if we reached a certain monthly donation threshold that I would stay on. And people responded, and I believe we reached just over 400 to get the stretch goal. So yes, I am on once again.
You are. He is here this month. Now, sadly for Rob, it has actually fallen down to $3.99. And I don't want to sound like PBS here, but if you want to save Rob...
I was going to say, it's too close to call.
For $1 a day, you can literally put Rob on the podcast.
Basically.
But yeah, so...
And don't forget that now this podcast, when I am on it, is available on Podbean and Spotify for the audio recording of the podcast for your listening pleasure.
Yeah, it's actually not even $1 a day, $1 a month. But anyway, yeah, so enough of that. But thank you everybody who supports us over there on Patreon and is making this happen. We appreciate you. But so in case you have never participated in that, or this is your first time hearing it, so it is a Patreon backed podcast. However, you probably are not listening to it on Patreon. The reason we care about it being on Patreon is, you know, the backers get early access to it. They also get early access to any of the videos that come out on my channel. They get shout outs if that's the level you subscribe at. Or you can pick subjects, as we'll be, talking about here in a bit. Or you can even be on the podcast, which we will have someone on here shortly, other than Rob, to talk about stuff. And that can be you at any time if you're choosing. There's a link in the description. And if you're already a Patreon backer, again, you can upgrade and you can say hashtag save Rob.
Hashtag save Rob, yes.
Yeah. All right, so anything else you want to tell the fine folks before we get started?
Not much, man. How you doing this month?
I'm okay. I'm just kind of, ready to get to the finish line of 2020. Obviously, we got the next-gen consoles about to drop. In fact, by the time most of you hear this, that will have already happened, but that's actually going to be part of the subject. So we will basically get started.
Please welcome back to the Figure It Out cast from last month, all the way from the UAE, Abdullah. How you doing, man?
Yeah, hello, everybody. I'm fine. How are you guys?
Not bad. Welcome back, man. It's good to hear from you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you. So
right.
we'll kind of dive into... All right, so last time, I apologize, you had come up with a few subjects that we just didn't have time for, but now that we have another episode, we can start conquering them. So the first one up, last time you wanted to talk about was, you had asked the question, how has Nintendo been able to survive and be strong given the huge change in the gaming industry over the years? And so... I assume you're basically just saying, like, historically speaking, they've always had, like, lower tier hardware for the most part. And their business, they're not a major, they're a major company, but they're not like a technological conglomerate. They don't typically follow a lot of normal trends, and yet they defy any sense of reason by still not only being here, but being predominant. Is that essentially the case you're making?
Yes, let me just clarify a little bit. Yeah, basically what you just said is the general premise of my question, but I wanted to note that before we begin to answer this, is that the general trend that you follow is power. Most of the people would refer to a console is good if it's more powerful, but as you said, Nintendo has been or has defied that rule. I would say so. All I wanted to know, what do you guys think of that, and is that even true? And well, if most people, the general public, cares about the power the most thing, how has Nintendo been able to make its way? For example, after the fall of the Wii U, for example, how has it been able to pick up so easily, even though the console that it has is not strong? The same case goes for the Wii. And yeah, just the historically, how did that happen? So that's just the major point I wanted to clarify before we begin.
Sure. So just so I can be sure, because you mentioned the Wii U there specifically, do you want us to focus more on recent years or like all time?
I think overall, I mean, they must have some sort of strategy that they've been able to survive, and you can see that gaming has changed a lot, right? The gaming world and the gaming community has changed, and the ideas, but you can still see Nintendo being some sort of a constant factor, right?
Yeah. So Rob, would you like to?
What I mean.
Rob, would you like to tackle this first, or do you want me to do this?
Yeah, no, so Nintendo's an interesting case in video game history because they've never had the most powerful console in any given generation. People always point to the Super Nintendo being more powerful than the Genesis, but in that generation, the Neo Geo AES was far and away more powerful than the NES, the Super Nintendo. Nintendo 64 not using discs, using cartridges instead. The GameCube using mini DVDs and not full-size DVDs. Nintendo
even that one just loses out to the Xbox in any argument.
Yeah,
trust. One of the most widely viewed videos on my channel literally discusses this subject. It's like the subject was, why isn't Nintendo hardware powerful? Like, I've gotten so much like flack for that video over the years, generally by people who don't, I'm just going to say it, generally by people who don't know a whole lot about the history of video games, because they tend to think that like, oh, okay, so 5th generation was just the PS1, the N64, and that's it. They sometimes remember the Saturn and they've never heard of anything else. Or people just say like, LOL, bro, NES was more powerful than Atari, as if they're in the same generation or anything like that. And what you're saying is correct. Basically, in no given generation did Nintendo ever have the single most capable piece of hardware. Even in the 5th gen, where you can make their best case with the Nintendo 64, you can argue that the storage format did cause problems. But at the same time, if you really want to get technical about it, the Apple Pippin, even though nobody owns one except for me and like 2 other people on the planet, was that generation. And it was more capable.
Yes.
So it doesn't really... I mean, that one is just kind of like an anomaly. But at the same time, the basic point I think that Rob and I are probably hitting on... I'm sorry, Rob, if I did cut you off. But basically what I'm assuming you're trying to say is... they've never really had the most capable generation hardware, and it doesn't really matter from their business model.
It doesn't, because they're focused on innovation in terms of gameplay, and above all else, quality. Now, you could look at a system like the Wii U, which flopped, and yes, that was technologically, inferior to the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, but you'd be hard-pressed to say that the quality of the games, the quality of the system itself, was poor as the system sales were. It was not. The games on the Wii U were fantastic, and their ports succeeding even more on the Switch show that. So I think Nintendo's success really comes down to innovation, quality of product, and branding. Because their biggest failures, such as the Virtual Boy or the Wii U, really came down to branding. And I would say, I love the Virtual Boy, I really do. The games on there are great. It's the medium to which play the games isn't ideal. But so even when they're failing with Flash. They're doing it the right way.
Could we consider another factor with Nintendo? Could it be that if you go back to, I think it was the 80s, it's the 80s, where the NES started, and you could see that Nintendo started to make itself one of the well-known icons of video games. Do you think that the history that it has on its shoulders really helped Nintendo survive, other than being just innovative?
Oh, 100%. They ride so hard on their name, it's ridiculous. That's the only reason the Wii U even got as far as it did. And since we're talking the history here and we were talking the technical side of things, to be very clear, Nintendo always had competitive hardware until the Wii. That was the first time where they said, you know what, we're just going to fall back an entire generation hardware-wise and just ride it out. Other than you could debate the Game Boy. I mean, what was it? Gunpei Yokoi had that quote about basically taking advantage of old tech that we know in and out. He said
utilizing the The old technology.
Yeah, withering of old utilizing the withering technology or something. He had a good quote about it. And basically all it means is we're going to use out-of-date technology because we know it so well that we can absolutely push it, and then we can bring the savings on to the customers, which that is definitely an effective part of Nintendo's business model and always has. You can look at the current generation consoles that are about to drop at the time we're recording this and will have dropped by the time the majority of you hear it, and you look at the price tags of, say, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, and it's about $500 US retail. Whereas Nintendo's current generation hardware only launched at $300. I mean, and that's because it's older tech. That's what Nintendo has done. Nintendo has never put out a $500 console. They aren't trying to do that. They're trying to basically say, okay, we will be the family-friendly one. I want to say kid-friendly, but really it's family-friendly is probably the term they prefer because you don't have to be a kid to enjoy it. They want that. They also they have this install base loyal to their brand because they've been around now of the current three longer than anybody, and they also have the most valuable IPs in all of video games. I mean, it does not matter what type of context you put Mario's name on, that will get attention. There's a reason that people buy things like Mario Tennis when any other tennis game would really be just kind of a niche thing. Or the reason this Philips CDI, which is a platform almost nobody cares about, I guarantee you, anyone who does know what that platform is says, oh yeah, there's also those Zelda and Mario games, and no one can ever cite anything else on it.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. Search for cutting you off,
you're
but
fine.
What you said is practically. I think it's one of the major things that Nintendo tries to work on because I think when they started off in the video game industry, I mean technically they started I think in
they were a toy
generation.
company.
1880s.
If we're talking about them as a company or a video game context.
No, I'm talking a company. They're like 130 or 131 years old, but I'm talking about video games. They started in Japan, I think, right?
They started in the 70s doing Pong clones and arcade games.
So it was not that color. Okay, maybe. It was in the second generation then, where they started.
Yeah.
Or the third generation where they boomed. I think.
No, first gen.
They boomed.
Second.
Second.
They had Pong clones. That was first gen.
Yeah, but
Pong clones.
the TV game 6 didn't come out until the second gen.
Second generation. That was.
What was the year on it?
I think it was 76, 77.
That would be. That would be first gen.
Yeah, that's close to the Odyssey. In the 70s.
Odyssey was 72, but I don't know.
I'm
just a historian. Don't.
Yeah, no, don't. Yeah. Well, actually, to tell you the truth, I don't have the numbers in front of me, so he could be right about that.
That's. I mean, that's not the point here. I think the point here is that
this is how nerdy we are, dude. Though we're debating the history of Nintendo Pong clones and which generation they sit in. That's what you guys signed up for, everybody.
Well, that's coming back to the point. Nintendo boomed in the third generation with at least in the North American region. I'm definitely sure about that. They boomed in the third generation with the NES, right? And that was the Famicom over in Japan. So that's when they boomed, and you could see that they have defined the gaming world. Then I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that people would not say video games. They would just say, I'll get a Nintendo. I mean, a Nintendo would be even just a symbol for video games. I'm not sure if that point is 100% true or not, but
I assume what you're saying is Nintendo saved the gaming industry.
Well, that's a different topic. I do believe that, but that's a different topic.
Okay, so what you're saying is Nintendo just kind of made the video game industry. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, it defined the video game industry and made it into mainstream. I guess back again to mainstream, more proper mainstream, and it has been going on, carrying the momentum from where Nintendo initially, kicked things back again. I think that by itself should.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to refine that point, just to clarify, I'll boil that down. Yeah. Nintendo globalized video games. Because Atari made it a household name, at least in the U.S. But I would give Nintendo credit for being like, that's like the Kleenex of video games. You don't call them, even though they're tissues, you call them Kleenex. Whereas, and like your most casual of people who knows what a video game is will sometimes just call it a Nintendo. Do you ever have? I'm sure a lot of you out there had parents or relatives who were just like, "Put away your Nintendo," even if you're like, "I'm playing a PlayStation." They just call it that. And so you give them credit with that sort of brand loyalty, which, as I pointed out before, I think is the reason that the Wii U got as far as it did. Because under most contexts, like that would have burned out, like, 3DO style.
Yeah, so I think we could give back to the point again. Nintendo has also utilized its history, I guess, or its base, and has been able to utilize that correctly. I mean, there are other companies who have not been able to hold on to what they have started, and I think that could be integral to why Nintendo is currently being able to be on par with Sony and Microsoft, even though they have inferior hardware.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Brand loyalty is a massive part of why they are still successful, and I think that they also make a lot of interesting marketing moves that I think is also what keeps them relevant, because they don't just sit back and say, hey, we're going to have a console that's an entire generation behind so you can play like these old games you've already had for 10 years. They also do a lot of oddball stuff that Microsoft and to a greater extent Sony tend to really replicate. So as much as I hated the Wii, I do acknowledge that they were the ones responsible for the motion control craze. Even if they didn't invent that technology, they were the ones to popularize it. And then Sony especially followed suit with like the magic wand that they came out with, and Microsoft cursed us with the Kinect. But as you continue on, Nintendo basically continues to be like, oh, we're gonna popularize portable stuff. Sony had to try and do that. To Microsoft's credit, they were like, why don't we just try integrating with phones? And then the Windows Phone failed. But they tend, and now they do even these oddball things like there's that Switch fitness game, and then there's that Switch, like, what's that one with like the cardboard boxes,
the Labo.
Yeah, there's a Labo one. What's the Ring Fit was the one I'm saying with the fitness game.
Yeah.
And then there's like now that one with like AR and like the Mario Kart toys.
Mario Kart.
Yeah, they just keep doing weird stuff that I don't think Microsoft or Sony would independently do. And I that's like part of the equation, but the other part of it is the brand name associated with it. Like Sony could definitely put out a set of like RC cars with like Sackboy and whatever their various PlayStation icons, and it might do okay. But with Nintendo, they know if they try something odd, but they put Mario on it or they put Link in it or whatever, automatically it's going to be successful. I mean, Rob and I were kind of talking about this not too long ago. You have the Mario All-Stars trilogy thing they just put out with like just 3 basic emulated re-releases of games we've had access to for in some cases like almost 30 years, 25 years, and it's like the hottest selling game of the season, and it's just because it's Mario. And I think that really, like, you just combine all of these things, all these factors they have going for them, and that's what's keeping them together. But I feel like if you took out one of those pillars, if you took out the family-friendly aspect, if you took out the affordability aspect, if you took out the brand loyalty aspect, if you took out the IPs, any one of those comes down, and I think the House of Cards falls. But luckily for them, they've kind of put the whole thing together in kind of a hexagon-like way where it's so strong it's just not going anywhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does actually. Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate and basically summarizes the whole thing regarding how Nintendo has been able to make it up until now and actually survive any of the changes that's been going on in the gaming world. I mean, I believe so.
Hell yeah. So we could have another discussion separately at some point, maybe why that didn't work for the Wii U, but yeah, that's another one altogether. But I don't know. What are you thinking? Are you good here? Or Rob, you haven't really said much on this. What's your thoughts? Actually, Rob, why don't we entertain that idea? Why don't you give us an elevator pitch of why you think that method didn't apply to both the Wii U and perhaps the Virtual Boy, if you feel like going down that rabbit hole?
If I may just mention one note, I just double-checked. I think Nintendo did start in the first generation,
Pong clones!
Well, TV Game 6 came out in 1977. Long story short, it depends on your metrics of generational consoles, basically. By that point, the Fairchild Channel F and the 2600 were already out, but they're making a Pong clone, so it's like... Yeah, this is a discussion.
This is a discussion we're probably going to have on another podcast, so I'll mostly save it. But here's the thing: generations are defined. They're not like national borders where it's just like there's a line and we've all kind of figured out where it is for the most part. They're basically like 50% timing and 50% technology, which leads to these weird bleed overs. Like the Neo Geo CD is indisputably a 4th generation console, yet it came out like a full 5 years after like the first 5th gen console. Timing isn't always the biggest thing. But then technology in of itself isn't also the biggest thing. I mean, like the Mattel Hyperscan came out in 2005, but it is less capable than a PS1. Are we saying that there was just a really, really ridiculously late 5th gen console that came out in the 7th gen? Is that, I mean, like there is partially a time argument and partially a technological argument. So we can have that discussion another time, I think, because I think when that's really going to matter is when we have to start deciding where the Switch falls. But let's just leave everybody on pins and needles with that one and finish up this particular subject. So again, Rob, I would invite you to say, with everything we've discussed, why do you think that Nintendo could not pull out a win with the Wii U and perhaps to a lesser extent the Virtual Boy?
The reason that those consoles failed is, I think it really comes down to overreach and hubris. Basically, both of those consoles were coming off of juggernaut successes of, in the Virtual Boy's case, you could say the Super Nintendo, but you could also say the Game Boy, because technically the Virtual Boy is a portable, even though it's not. And the Wii U was coming off the Wii, Nintendo's best-selling home console of all time. So basically, the crossover success that their predecessors had led Nintendo to try and grab a larger share of the market than maybe they needed to or should have targeted. Virtual Boy was hubris. It was, hey, we could advance technology 20 years and do a VR headset for a portable console, when in reality the technology was not there to support it. And the Wii U was really the hubris of Nintendo believing that the tens of millions of people that bought a Wii U but had never bought another video game console before that, mostly adults, were going to follow them over to the next generation. And in both cases, that did not happen, and both were unmitigated disasters for Nintendo.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty interesting point, actually, about the hubris thing, because historically that is bad for any video game company. That's where that like console rule of threes always comes in.
Yeah, it always happens.
If you're unfamiliar with that, basically, on average, the third console of any one manufacturer tends to be the one where they do something unbelievably stupid that costs them the generation. The basic logic behind that is, the first time you make a console, it has to be a success. You're kind of humble when you're making your first one, and it has to be enough of a success that you actually make the second one. And then with the second one, you've kind of improved on it, and you're trying to appeal. And if you make a third one, it's only because the second one was a juggernaut success. So with the third one, you tend to believe we've got this, we know what we're doing, and now we can find ways to kind of screw the customer over, quite frankly, in certain ways, or screw things up, because we are so set it does not matter if we do these anti-consumer or anti-market type of moves, and that tends to lead to big problems. In the case of Nintendo, that would be, you can argue, the Nintendo 64, where they basically said, forget how much we've been, the Super Nintendo was this huge hit, but who really cares? Like, everybody will follow us. We're Nintendo, so we'll make cartridges, even though every single developer says do not do that. And so what happened? They ended up losing tons of third-party support, and they opened the door for Sony to take it all from them. They even lost to the Sega Saturn in Japan. In Sega's case, with the success of the Genesis, granted, that wasn't, it basically was their third console. They basically then screwed up and tried multiple different consoles, where they went ahead with the 32X, the Sega CD, and the Saturn, of course. The Sega's a different thing to unpack entirely. Sony with the PlayStation 3, they PS2, most successful console ever, and then they go like, all right, we can do all these ridiculous things, and as everybody tends to know in this industry, is just insane. And the PS3 was by far the least successful home console they ever had. And Microsoft infamously started off the Xbox One with all that DRM crap and all that stuff. It's a trend. And in Nintendo's case, because they've been around so long, they did it twice. Once again, to follow trends. GameCube is where they had to re-win back everybody's faith. They had to win back the format, bring back developers, and to an extent, they did that. And then the Wii, they were like, okay, we'll take it to the next level. They've got this super success. And then what happened? They were so successful, they literally attached the name of that success to their the new third console, the Wii U, and it didn't work. Even though I love the Wii U personally, it's just the curse of threes, man.
I think we're all on kind of the same page about that, but it's just, I think bottom line, just Nintendo's ability and longevity of success, and being able to roll with punches and be able to innovate and attract new customers with their IPs and their identity is key to their success, and it always has been.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Yep.
I guess
Anything?
That basically summarizes everything.
Cool.
I think what was just said basically summarizes the whole thing.
All right, then we will move on. Thank you, Abdullah, very much for that particular subject. So our next subject here is from another Patreon backer. Once again, if you join the Patreon, you can get early access to videos, you can get shout-outs, you can pick a subject, or you can even be on, just like Abdullah is here. But this particular one comes from the supreme overlord of my Discord, Caleb. And what he wanted us to talk about was how well do we think the 9th gen consoles will sell this year, particularly the Xbox Series X and PS5, and do we think it's going to be possible to walk into a store and get one? The second half of that subject is very easy to answer. At the time we're recording this, literally Sony and I think Microsoft both said yesterday there will not be any in-store units available, at least in the United States. Everything is going to be done online. So there's not really much to say there unless we want to talk about that as a separate issue, I guess. So maybe we will. But for now, let's focus on the former part of the question. How well do we think they will perform by the end of the year? And I'll let how about Abdullah? Let's let him go first.
Yeah.
Okay, this kind of puts me on the spot, but...
do you want a second to think about it? I can throw it to Rob if you like.
Actually, I'll try to answer a little bit regarding the first part of the question. But the thing is, I'm not really sure about the worldwide thing, but I can tell you locally from the region I'm in.
Sure. That would be interesting, actually.
By the end of the year, if you compare them, I think that... regarding the region I'm in, that there will be good sales for the console, but considering only the PlayStation 5. When it comes to the Xbox, I don't think it's gonna sell very much in here. It would, and I think it would generally, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox would, at least in the region I'm in, from what I can see, from my friends and from the people I ask, is that they would sell. Okay, they'd sell well, I guess, but I really don't think they're gonna do well compared to how the PlayStation. The PlayStation 5. I'm not sure if it's gonna do well like the PlayStation 4 did, but I think overall it is gonna have. It is gonna sell. it's gonna sell quite well, I guess, in at least when it comes to the PlayStation 5. And in terms of the Xbox, I'm not really aware of the trends going on here, but I do think that they would both generally follow the same trend they followed with the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4.
Bam. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that. I think that in the US, anyway, what I've noticed is PS5s are utterly impossible to get. I was unable to secure one myself, although I limited myself by only being willing to buy one from Best Buy. But with the Xbox Series X, I personally did not have a problem doing that. And I'll talk about that in a separate video when I actually get it. But in fact, at the time we're recording this, mine's already shipped. But because we're not going to have the option to buy them in stores, it essentially tells me that for the most part, all the units are already sold or at least accounted for. So I actually think whatever the number is that they have made and are going to be available is also the same number that will sell by the end of the year. Because the only time you get a discrepancy is like when you have units available that are unsold. But if we're not going to have any available, then that kind of answers that question. It's just that we don't know how many they're actually going to have made already. Unless you guys know it, and I just don't know that stat.
Well, I know Sony came out last month and said, I believe in their fiscal kind of earnings projection, that they have sold or expected that the PS5 will surpass the PS4's equivalent launch sales. PS4 sold 7 million, I believe, in the first quarter after it launched in, what was that, 2013 or whatever?
2013.
Yeah, and
November 19th, 2013.
Yeah, so Sony is expecting that they will have 8.25 million PlayStation 5s shipped between the third and fourth quarters of their fiscal year. So,
sorry, did I say 19th? I meant 15th. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get the nerd comments being like, it was actually the 15th.
Yeah. So they are going to... It's going to be a success. I mean, they've already sold more than the PS4 in its equivalent period. But I think the ability not having them in stores, also paired with the current global situation that prevents Black Friday sales to exist how they have for the past few decades, is going to hamper the ability for more people to get them. And also, I mean, I don't think we spoke about this much lately, is that scalping is becoming such a huge problem in online settings, where people are going in with bots and and basically grabbing up all of these online purchases for these consoles. And it doesn't matter what, they're basically creating their own market because of the demand of these consoles. The markup sales for these things are just increasing exponentially, to the fact that people are going out and buying two of them and selling them for $1,000-$1,500 a pop.
I agree with you completely, but that's a separate issue. As far as even if a bot does that and the guy pays for it, that's two sold units. And that's really the question, is how many officially Sony or Microsoft sold units will you have? And I would bet, at least in Sony's case, whatever they've put out is what they're going to sell. Unless they're going to surprise us with oh, surprise, here's 1 million extra units, even though they themselves, at the time we record this yesterday, said that would not happen. Microsoft, I think you'll have a much easier time finding an Xbox Series S. In fact, I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday, and he said that one of the GameStops near him is telling them they're going to have 20 Xbox Series X in stock day of, but PS5s none, zero. And that may not be representative in any way, shape, or form. It might just be unique to his situation. But
Best Buy announced that they are not having either system in store until the new year. And I've asked that because I was unable to get either console in pre-order, so I visited a couple of my local Best Buys just to say, hey, are you guys going to have any day of, and they're like, nope. And Best Buy just came out and announced that, I guess this was yesterday, announced that they are not going to have any in store. That, but that's indicative of the time that we're living in with the lockdowns and everything. That online shopping for Black Friday and the holidays is going to take precedence for this year. So
yeah, that's actually an interesting discussion. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's alright. I wanted to make out a point. You just mentioned that it's easier to get an Xbox Series X, or actually to secure one, or it's more probable that you would be able to get one than a PlayStation 5. And I think that's definitely true, because there's a point that I wanted to mention here, is that recently I was trying to try and get a pre-order for an Xbox, and I was able to actually find that. However, when it came to the PlayStation 5, everything's out almost from all the places. If you want to get one, you're gonna have to buy someone's pre-order, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe in the initial start, the PlayStation 5 would still better, but going forward, they may follow the same trend, or maybe better, or a little worse. I don't know, than PlayStation 4 and Xbox One.
Yeah, that's in of itself another interesting discussion, because you can basically, from the reports we've been hearing, Sony had shortage issues as far as number of units they could even produce, whereas we've heard nothing about Microsoft having the same type of problems, or at least I have never heard anything like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if that's the case, it may not be that the PS5 is so vastly more demanded. And when I say this, I mean I'm applying it to the US and I guess Canada, because the rest of the world admittedly does not really care about the Xbox brand all that much. Maybe the UK and possibly Australia, but that's about it, other than a few hardcores here and there. But as far as market relevance, it's typically just the US and Canada when it comes to the Xbox brand. And here it's proving easier to get one, but that might simply be not just due to lack of demand, but because of increased availability. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's probably could be the case. I mean, we have to wait and see how the numbers are going to look soon. But I think from now, the predictions or the things indicate that we might follow the trend that PlayStation would sell better starting on release than the Xbox. But this is just speculations. We're not sure about
absolutely.
About the whole supply thing.
Yeah, yes. I think the bottom line is that there's a ton of people, myself included, that if the supply was there, would have bought one. I know way too many people that got shut out of these pre-orders, and that I think that all of the release units are accounted for in the United States because there are so many people that said they wouldn't able to get them. If they were available, Sony and Microsoft would make them available. For
I
sale.
agree.
They want these things to be the big holiday success, that all console manufacturers hope to be. So there's no point of creating manufactured scarcity when you're launching a console like that.
Yeah, Nintendo's the one that's known for, or at least gets blamed a lot for that type of thing. To some extent, that's true with them. As I said before earlier when we were talking about Nintendo, Sony has a proud tradition of kind of following Nintendo's trends. So the conspiracy, if I'm wearing the tinfoil hat, it says that Sony might be doing something like that, but I don't actually believe that. I just want that very clear. I think that Sony is trying to sell every single unit that they actually have, but I think that they were just suffering from shortage problems. And about before, you were talking about this as the future of shopping, at least for this year. It is actually an interesting point, because with COVID and everything, and yes, we're just calling that now, I guess you don't get demonetized for it anymore, it used to be a fun kind of tradition that you would camp out at a store for a console and get it at midnight or whenever the store opened. But they obviously do not want people congregating and hanging around each other for hours on end in the middle of a pandemic. So as much as it sucks that we can't just walk into Best Buy and get one, I understand why they're doing that. It's probably the right call, as annoying as it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's I have a romantic kind of view of that, the urban camping standing out in the freezing cold for a console. Like I did that most recently for the Switch itself. So it's not an exclusively historical concept. But I think that's just indicative of the shift overall of shopping going online. I think just more people, as it would be indicative of the shift towards digital gaming over physical gaming.
Well,
people are just way more comfortable doing shopping online and getting it delivered right from their couch, as opposed to going out. Yeah.
Here's the thing. I don't disagree with that at all, except for one point. I do feel that there's a difference here. Obviously, if I had the choice to get the thing shipped to me, yeah, I would just take that. But the difference here is they're straight up saying you will not have the option to come into the store. And I think that that's solely due to the pandemic. I can't imagine that they really have any other reason to do that, because they get your money either way. This one just avoids potential exposure to a potentially deadly virus. I think that's the only reason that they're doing that this time. I don't think that this trend is going to hold where consoles can only be bought online now.
But I think that's just about the current pandemic that's going on, or whatever's going on is that has made this.
I think that's because of the pandemic, but the pandemic is, I think, in part causing these supply chain issues.
I don't doubt that at all, but that's different.
It's like if they had the capability of making more and having them available in stores, why wouldn't they? It doesn't make sense. Sony cannot afford for the PlayStation 5 to be anything other than a runaway success. They don't want to give Xbox a foothold, and an Xbox is going to want to play catch up. If they had the capability of making 5 million more units to have out in stores on next Tuesday, they would, because they would get a whole lot of people looking for a PS5 and they can't get one. And you know what? There's an Xbox right there.
Could you play with that actually to possibly get more sales going on, especially since that the PlayStation 4 has been doing better than the Xbox, so they might use that to their advantage. But overall, I think the whole current situation would be very limiting to both companies.
Yeah,
there Absolutely. You go. So I guess we can kind of talk about the second half of this question by mutating it a little bit. When do you think it will be possible to walk into a store and get one? Certainly not this year. I mean, they've, again, made that very clear. So I don't think arbitrarily it's January 1st, 2021, and you can just buy them in stores. But, what would you guess? Were we talking the spring?
I think, you have to look at what Sony has said in terms of their sales numbers of pre-orders for the PS5, beating out the PS4's previous numbers. That does not end at December 31st, 2020. They're talking about the fiscal year. So their fourth quarter earnings are going to extend into 2021. So I think that you're not going to be able to get at least a PS5 just in a walk-in situation until maybe late February or March.
I'm sad to say that I actually kind of agree with that, unless they surprise us with a major influx of units, which is not impossible. But that happened with both the PS4 and the Xbox One, and even not that this one necessarily matters, but the Wii U. I remember walking in just casually on launch day and just being like, maybe I'll get one if they have it, and surprised they had a bunch. And then the same thing. It wasn't a problem with PS4 or Xbox One. This one, again, I think you're right when you say it was due to shortage issues, primarily pertaining to the pandemic. But either way, those shortage issues have not changed. The pandemic still exists, and therefore labor issues are still a problem. So the amount of time that will need to go by before you can realistically walk into a store, and I say walk into a store, not just order one online, walk into a store, is probably when demand is far lower and units are far higher, which is just a time equation. And I agree with your assessment. That probably will be about February or March.
Yeah, I essentially agree with the same. Actually, I had almost the same. I was gonna say almost the same date, which is February or March.
So there you go, everybody. There's our call.
Retailers have said that there will be more available, on Black Friday this year.
Yes,
but they are going to be online. They're not going to be in store.
Yeah, Best Buy, I think it was Best Buy and Walmart both said that on the actual launch days, you will be able to buy one online that day. But you, as far as I can tell, you won't be able to go pick it up. And it will have to be shipped to you, which I'm fine with, if assuming I can actually get one that way. That'd be great. But yeah, I find it kind of interesting that they're doing it this way. But I mean, it also would be weird if they just perpetually were sold out for like 6 months. But who knows? We'll see how that goes.
Yep.
Just a small note here is
Sure.
that the prediction I had about the February-March thing, the same thing that you guys mentioned. I'm not sure of how the situation will be in Dubai or in my region. Actually, maybe it'll be possible to physically get one. I'm not sure if that'll be through retailers, but maybe through independent shops that would be possible.
If you get one, send it to me.
All right,
The shipping alone, man.
Send it to me.
all right, no problem. But just don't tell anybody.
Yeah, it'll be on the down low.
No problem.
All right. So anybody else got anything else to say on this, or should we move on?
No, let's move
I
on.
think
We're good.
let's move on.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the next one is just a real quick. We got to do a round of shout-outs. So everybody I'm about to give a shout-out to is, once again, a Patreon backer, and they're at the tier in which they get a shout-out. Again, you can sign up to get early access to this and other videos, get shout-outs, pick subjects, or even be on here. But to these following people, we've got Eduardo Cruz, who is brand new. Welcome, Eduardo. Caleb Bravo, Michael Kelly, Luis Bonilla, Joseph Tamburino, and Troy Wagner. Once again, that's Eduardo Cruz, Caleb Bravo, Michael Kelly, Luis Bonilla, Joseph Tamburino, and Troy Wagner. Actually, Caleb he's a tier up. I accidentally read his name multiple times. Caleb, extra shout out for you. But anyway, thank you everybody for being Patreon backers, and you guys who are listening, you can do that at any time. There's a link in the description. Thank you so much.
You're the real heroes.
You're the real MVPs.
And knowing is half the battle.
So, like, you remember in Avengers Endgame at the end when, like, Captain America's gonna lose, he's standing up to, like, Thanos all by himself, and then the portal's open and everybody comes out. Like, I am Captain America, and all of those Thanos and everybody, that's like the YouTube algorithm just trying to stop me from having a career. and Patreon is the little portals where all the other Avengers come out. So everyone who gets a shout out is like Black Panther and the Hulk and Spider-Man. On your Patreon, on your left. Yeah, that's you guys. So thank you very much. And again, sign up, because otherwise we're going to lose Rob next month, which is unfortunate. We literally
Save me!
We need $1 to keep Rob in there, at least for this month. So thank you very much, everybody. But we'll move on to the next subject here. Which, Abdullah, also you picked this as well. You wanted to talk about, this was kind of a general statement you made, and I'm kind of curious I want you to expand on this. Okay. You wanted to talk about social media and the effects on video game collecting.
Oh, okay. So actually, that seems from the way it's phrased, I think it seems like more of a thesis question that someone would write about.
Sure.
Because it's it is a very
I'd read that paper.
Huge. Okay. Well, let's see. Maybe we will make one. Anyway, back to the main point. So, what I essentially want to focus on is because when you say social media, you've got lots of things to speak about. But what I meant is that the effect on the video game collecting, as in the market and the prices and these things. How have channels like yourself, or there are many channels to mention, how these channels have changed video game collecting? How was it before? Because personally, I was not a video game collector. Had it not been for these channels. So they have obviously, because of these, for example, YouTube channels or generally social media platforms, they have created many new collectors and definitely caused a huge effect in the game or in the video game collecting world. So, just what are the advantages and disadvantages of that, and what do you guys think of it? Is it gonna make it better? Is it gonna make the video game collecting world better or worse, or what is the general what is your general
what's our take
idea
on
regarding
it?
this matter.
Rob, I want you to go on this first because I'm going to have a kind of unique perspective because I'm one of the people who contributes to this for either good or for bad.
You're part of the problem.
Yeah, in a way, that's a great way to put it. But you go first.
Well, it's not a problem.
Yeah, no.
That's why I said I contribute to the situation. He called it a problem.
No, I know. I think the question that you've posed, the effect of social media and specifically YouTube, I think that's what we're really going to focus on mostly.
Yeah, that's the biggest one.
Yeah, on video game collecting is a huge one. Now, Adam has always said for many years that that video game collecting kind of comes in waves as children who reach adulthood, want to rebuy their childhood and play games that they had, back when they were young or didn't get to play. That's always been a huge thing that starts people on retro collecting. But I think the prevalence of gaming YouTubers, streamers, and collectors on YouTube has created far more interest in retro gaming than would have occurred naturally. Because, and I think both of us, Abdullah and myself, are products of that. I always kind of had video games, always collected video games, but it wasn't until I discovered channels like Adam's, like the Angry Video Game Nerd, things like that really got me interested in more obscure things that I never heard of before, introduced me to different systems and different games that I never played before, and made me nostalgic for things that I have no direct nostalgia for, which is kind of an interesting thing. We're the nostalgia generation, but now we're nostalgic for things that have had no impact on our personal histories. And that I don't want to say glorification of, but that increase in popularity of retro gaming because of YouTube channels like Adam's has inflated the prices of games because they're just simply getting more exposure to more people. There's jokes, I'm sure there's like memes online now that channels like a Metal Jesus Rocks or something, like does a hidden gems video and maybe shines a light on a game that isn't very popular, and then suddenly a week after the price is doubled on eBay because everybody's like, oh shit, this game looks really awesome, I want to go play that. Is that a problem? Yes. Yeah, you could say it's a problem for your wallet, but I wouldn't call it a problem because it's just simply growing the fan base. It's simply exposing great works of art and great technological devices to people that wouldn't have otherwise explored them. And I think it's a great thing. I teach classes on video game history, and I don't think if I had taught these classes 15 years ago or 10 years ago, I don't think I would have gotten nearly as big a turnout in terms of student interest and enrollment without the effect of social media, because they've seen a funny video from Scott the Woz or the Angry Video Game Nerd about the Intellivision. Now they get the chance to learn about it and to play it themselves. And I think that's done a great service to people like me that make careers now based on, and Adam, as well as his channel, make careers out of retro gaming because of the interest from social media.
Yeah, most definitely, Rob. I would agree completely with what you said, and as you said, when it comes to my case and your case as well, basically we're products of this. I mean, personally, I got seriously into video game collecting through a channel called the Game Display. The guy who runs it is called Andrew, and through, for example, the videos that I've seen him do, I've gotten more interested in video games, and I soon expanded to other channels and started to learn more and more and get into the hobby seriously. And that's that channel was the channel that made me a collector, for example. And I could see that many other collectors would tell you that I became a collector. Why? because of this channel or because of that channel. So most definitely, the social media aspect or content creators like Adam, for example, have definitely made people aware or made people interested to get to start video game collecting, and not just collecting, but I believe you mentioned this point as well. The idea of this point is that we have some sort of nostalgia for things that are not part of our history.
Yeah.
And I think that's 100% true. I mean, when it comes to my case, I grew up with the GameCube mainly, but I do have huge nostalgia to consoles that were not there when I was a kid. They were pretty much of the generations before, but I do feel a special connection towards these consoles, and that mainly comes from getting to hear the experiences of people through social media when it comes to this topic, the video game collecting. And you get to hear their experiences, and basically you get to be in their shoes, I would say, and get to have special connection to things that you never thought you would. And that's just because you've seen people who have an interest towards this or an interest towards that. So yes, I think that the benefits of this thing are pretty high, but of course the negatives do exist, and that would include mainly financial negatives. But overall, if as people who love video games, through these platforms, we are creating more people who are able to, or more people who are interested, and therefore we're actually, in a way, helping preserve and grow the video game industry.
Word.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
So yeah, I don't disagree with anything you guys are saying, although I would like to offer some, I'm going to say, more unique insight from being one of the guys who contributes to this, again, I will say, situation. Because over the years, I've definitely been told many times, like, yo man, thanks, because of you I collect all this stuff, and my response is always, I'm sorry for burdening you with that, because it is fun. I mean, I'm just gonna keep it real. It's fundamentally economically irresponsible to collect a bunch of stuff. Like, it just is. I do it, don't get me wrong, I love it, but I can detach myself from the enjoyment of it and understand that it's kind of dumb to do, but I love it anyway. It's kind of like eating bad food. Like, I eat a pizza, I know I'm gonna gain weight from it, but God, I love it. So like, it's basically,
you gotta realize the fine line between overdoing something and actually enjoying it. Because if you don't notice or focus or put that in your mind, you would flop basically.
Precisely, you'd have a heart attack like if you ate pizza every day. Precisely the same thing.
Exactly.
So, but because of that, I do want to say that, never once, and I don't get accused of this much as far as like inflating the prices of stuff. There's really only two things that I've ever been directly connected to that I'm aware of. One is the Divers 2000 Dreamcast, because I'm like the only guy on YouTube who has one. And I've done a few videos on it, and when I got it, it was like nothing. Like, nobody knew about it, nobody had ever heard of it. And I did a few videos, and the prices went from like $300 per unit to, like, if you're lucky, $7,000. Because it's just an unbelievably obscure thing that no one outside of a super Dreamcast fan would even be aware existed. Even Sega themselves, I've talked to, they don't even have one of those. Like, nobody has that thing. So I'm somewhat responsible for that, but the reason I don't get any flack for it is because nobody seriously tries to buy one of those, because it's such a ludicrous thing. It's not like it's so rare that everybody's trying to get one. The logic of trying to sit down and buy an entire CRT television is just like insane. So people find that one to be more just fun. The only other one I've ever been credited to is there is an original Xbox game called Damon Vector that even people in the Xbox scene thought for years was just a rumor, because nobody really knew if it was real or not, because no one had ever verifiably seen a copy. I found a guy out of nowhere in Singapore who had a copy of it. It was a game only released in Singapore and Taiwan for the original Xbox in very limited quantities. So I remember actually talking to some people in Xbox groups, and they were like, dude, that game's a myth. It doesn't exist. We just see these like temporary pre-orders on PlayAsia and other places, some basic artwork, but no one has a rip of it. No one knows if it's real. But I found this guy in Singapore. He sold it to me for $20. He didn't care. So then I showed it in a video, and suddenly the prices for that game skyrocketed, and the Xbox scene started sharing the video, being like, dude, it's real. It's real. He shows footage of it. It's real. And then now that game is like a few $100s if you can find it, which you can't. It's hard. But even that one, I don't really get blamed for so much because nobody collects original Xbox except for the super hardcore, and they were more like grateful for finding out it existed, if that makes any sense. The person who gets way too much flack for this type of thing is my buddy Jason, aka Metal Jesus Rocks. He gets constant flack for, quote, raising the prices, which is just a byproduct of the fact that he's giving exposure to games you otherwise never heard of. If there's an obscure game that no one's heard of, it generally doesn't have much value. But he just finds a game. He's like, this is a cool game. You guys should check it out. Because he has such a big base, everybody looks at it and goes, he's right, that is a cool game, let's go buy it. And then all the cheap copies go. So then the prices naturally start going up to adjust for that. And then the people who are later to the party start seeing this game that they think is great, and now they see that it's all skyrocketed as a result. That's just capitalism. If I'm the guy sitting on 20 copies of a game I can't get rid of for 20 years, and everybody starts buying them really rapidly out of nowhere, I'm probably going to raise the price because there's suddenly a demand on all this crap I've been sitting on. That's economics. That's what everybody does. You can't blame Jason for that occurring. You have to blame the guys on eBay who started jacking up the prices just because of how capitalism is. But, I mean, there's no better example of that than the whole Revenge of the Bird King thing. Do you guys remember that story? I mean, Rob, I'm assuming you do.
Yeah, because it was the one of the guys from Limited Run Games kind of, I guess, self-published or self-released like this... this game, Revenge of the Bird King, which was, I guess, taken down digitally from the store, and Limited Run was prevented from selling, selling the physical copies anymore, because I think that's a requirement of getting a physical copy of a PS4 game is that it has to be available digitally. So yeah, it basically became this thing that you could only get at like the Limited Run pop-up shop or at conventions or something like that. So secondhand, yeah.
Right. So I talked to Joe. Joe's the guy you're referring to. Now, what he tried to have done here, just like they would, is they tried to get a limited run version of it. And as Rob said, Sony basically pulled the game digitally, and they hadn't finished producing all the copies physically. They just had some that they had already sent to Joe at Limited Run, and they basically told him, you can't send them back to us. You also can't sell them officially, but you are allowed to sell them through third-party means at the original retail price without us sending any lawyers after you. Meaning he could sell them at conventions for what they were originally going to sell at, or he could sell them on eBay for what they were originally going to sell at. And that's all he did. He just wanted to get rid of them because at that point it's just a huge loss for him. So that's all he did. He had like whatever it was, like 45 copies that he brought to PRGE in 2019, Portland Retro Game Expo. And then he just decided, I'll bring the remaining copies to the pop-up shop in Cary, North Carolina, which I also went to. He got like death threats over that. And the other thing is people blamed Jason, Metal Jesus. And I talked to Jason about this at PRGE. When Jason heard the story that I just told all of you, he's like, that's cool. I'm going to tell a video, because Jason has this affinity, much like I do, for telling unique oddball stories. Regardless of what you think of the game, the circumstances about how it gets released is just fundamentally fascinating. That it would get this really small print run due to just a Sony legal quirk that they have decided they're not going to allow it to go any further. That's what makes it odd. And so he just wanted to talk about it. And he starts getting threats and people saying, like, you created... First of all, people are blaming Jason for, like, making the game, which is just ludicrous. And then also saying that he's getting a cut of every game, which is also equally stupid. And all this, like, conspiracy theory, tinfoil stuff, when all Jason wanted to do is be like, hey, guys, isn't this kind of interesting? As if, like, what the conversation we're having, where we're just talking about it being interesting, and then you all come after me like I invented this. It's just nuts. But because for some reason, Jason has become something of a polarizing figure, for that type of thing. It's been attached to his identity that he inflates prices when it's not like he sits there and goes, all right, guys, he puts his hands together like a cartoon supervillain, goes to eBay, he's like, what game are we going to make more expensive than it used to be? He doesn't sit down and do that. Nobody does that. And the arrogance to think that anyone would have the capability to do that is ridiculous. So it's just a circumstance of popularity and, supply and demand. It's just if you don't like it, then what you really fundamentally have an issue with is capitalism. That's just how that is. And so, I remember after talking to Jason about it, he's like, I am literally never doing a video like that again. I am never going to take an interesting story about something like that where I'm told like, hey, here's this weird thing that's happening. If it's weird like that, he's like, I'll just text my friends and tell them stuff. And he's like, I will not do a video about it anymore. It's not worth the hassle. And so occasionally he sends me messages or he sends other people messages, be like, here, this is this like cool thing that's happening. He would have at one time made entire videos telling people about that. And now he won't because of ridiculous harassment for no reason. Sorry, that's my inside track on all that.
Just one small thing about that Bird King story, especially, just to kind of tie it on. I think the mistake that Jason made was that in his video he says, "Yeah, there are copies available. You just have to like message Joe on on Twitter and like ask for a copy." Like I remember that was like literally in the video because I did it myself. I'm like, "Oh, that sounds cool. Like, let me see if I can get a copy." And Joe's like, stop messaging me.
Yeah, that was a mistake. Joe, like, when I saw him, he was stressed out of his mind because he had literally been getting death threats over this. And I don't blame him. That's insane that you would threaten someone's life over like a $30 piece of shit PS4 game. It's ridiculous.
It's a terrible game.
Yeah, that's why it was pulled originally anyway. But yeah, that is a mistake, and I'll say that is a mistake. Unless he was told by someone like Joe to say that, that's, But the truth was that Joe didn't have that many copies, and he was just trying to unload them at where he could, which just happened to be PRGE that year, and then the pop-up shop in North Carolina, and then he would be, like, out of stock. And he was just kind of like, I have to get rid of them. This is I'm going to those two things. It's logical. But that was kind of what turns out to be a no-win scenario, because if he just goes online and he says, convention exclusive, PRGE, be the first in line because only 45 copies. If you don't go there, go to hell. Like, how would that have gone down? How was he supposed to get rid of the copies? And to anyone out there who is angry about how he did it, you tell me, what is the superior alternative, keeping in mind that Sony had very specific restrictions on him? He was not allowed to sell it other ways. So you tell me what the actual correct way that would have satisfied you, that meets the parameters of the problem, would be. Go for it. I'd love to hear it. Okay, good. That's exactly my point. There are none. So he did it fine. He did. That's just how it is. It's one of those things where, unfortunately, people don't have that information. I don't blame them for getting mad. If I was under the impression that there was this like super rare PS4 game that I had to like buy a ticket to a convention to like halfway across the country to get any shot at getting, assuming I wanted the game, then yeah, that might be slightly irritating. But I wouldn't send death threats to a man. You know what I mean? That's ridiculous.
That's way over the line, I guess.
Hell yeah.
It's way over the line. Going to that point, and it doesn't make sense why people would actually do that.
Yeah, I agree.
But what are you gonna do? Many people are like that.
But yeah, that's the extremes that we're talking about. There's also, it is a generally good thing, the effect social media has on games, because as Rob said before, it basically gives games that came out at one time a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth bite of the apple, where they can find a new fan base years later. There could be some obscure Sega Genesis game nobody really played back in the day, and now some YouTuber found it and goes, has anybody ever heard of this? Like, I was the one who was talking about that McDonald's Treasureland Adventure game, which is a game that everyone goes like, why would that be good? It's about Ronald McDonald. I promise you, play that game. It is an amazing platformer. It's made by Treasure. They're the guys who made Ikaruga. It's a fantastic video game. And people eventually did find that and realized, like, wow, he's not kidding. This is actually a legit good game, and that Ronald McDonald game is actually worth some money now. That's a good thing because now people can actually play it and try it, and that's, I think, fundamentally good. It's just those other extremes where you go like, it's an unfortunate logical consequence, but let's all be civil about it, not send death threats to a man over a Revenge of the Bird King.
Yeah, that's plain stupid to do such a thing. And overall, regarding the whole idea of this example, I think it does not include games. It also extends to the hardware itself. Hardware that didn't sell well or wasn't well known would be on the spotlight through channels such as yours or even the Middle Jesus, who would shine the light on some consoles that were obscure, or consoles that were not well known, and from that point on, people would start talking about this and actually reading and knowing more. So I wouldn't think that this, although many people, I mean, the example you just mentioned would see the negative side of it. You could see that there is a much larger positive side to this matter, is that we're raising awareness and letting people know more about these things. But I mean, in the end, you're gonna have the people who are gonna threaten to kill you and stuff.
Bitches be crazy. We'll just leave it at that. But yeah, anything else to say on this, or should we move on to the last subject here?
I think we move on.
Yeah. Right? Okay. All right. So thank you, Abdullah, very much for picking that subject as well. That was actually a pretty good subject. Yeah. So the next one up.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
Well, you're not don't let it go to his head. Is that what you're trying to keep
exactly,
him?
Yeah.
He's trying to keep you down, man. All right.
That's all right. Appreciate that you guys at least liked it.
So the next subject here is I've got another backer named Leafy. If you guys remember him, he was on the podcast one time. He has decided he wants to just kind of pick subjects, although he tends to just let me pick the subject for him. But so shout out to Leafy. But the one we decided to pick on his behalf, I thought was just kind of a interesting story, and it'll probably, our discussion, I think, will just kind of evolve into a different direction. But basically the news itself is that Sega is going to be selling off their arcade business to a Japanese company called Genda. Now, to expand on that, Sega arcades will continue to use the Sega name, but Sega Sammy Holdings, which is the current owner of what we think of as Sega, is really not going to have anything much to do with it effectively by the end of this year. And what it practically means is that I'm sure you guys have seen pictures of them, unless you've actually been there, and I have, those arcade districts they have in Akihabara in Japan and things like that.
The Sega one closed 2 months ago.
I'm getting to that. Those arcade locations are basically going to come under control of Genda, but the arcade hardware is not really going to be produced or have much to do with Sega anymore. They will continue game development for arcades. However, they're going to reallocate most of those resources to actual like console and PC games. First of all, I want to get your opinion on all that, but it also is kind of reflective of what's kind of going on with Sega as a corporation. They are making certain changes. At the time we're recording this, like literally this morning, Sega announced they're trying to get like 650 of their Japanese employees to voluntarily resign. And as Rob just mentioned there, they closed those arcade locations. And where I'm going with all of this, ultimately, is that it seems like Sega of Japan in particular is trying to restructure what Sega is and where they focus. So we can go into that discussion, but before we do that, please, you guys both give me your take on all of the stuff I've already said.
It's sad, but I honestly think this is really indicative of the continued decline of arcades, across the world. Now, Japan, with kind of their Plinko arcades and various ones in Akihabara, were kind of some of the last vestiges of the traditional arcades that used to be found all around the United States, all around the world, back in the 80s and 90s. And it's disappointing, but it's not, it's not a huge thing, because Sega is still going to be developing these games. They're still going to be manufacturing the cabinets. and still going to be selling them. It's just the business is that they're selling to Genda is really the maintenance, the establishment of these arcades to amusement rental places, and it's because because of the decline of arcades. But I think COVID was really the last nail in the coffin for these things. These arcades are closed and have been for months now, and you need a lot of real estate to be able to house these machines. So it's a realistic outcome because of those two major factors.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying, and that was basically what I was going to mention. It's because overall arcades have gotten way downhill, and I mean, if you think about it, most of the time arcades currently are referred to, as part of the history. Nobody's actually, not many people are interested in that business overall, and as you stated, it's not an easy business to maintain, especially when you consider every sort of arcade machine, and the maintenance required for that is not that easy to hold on to, and add to that the current situation that's going on worldwide.
No, I think in here in the States at least, arcades are really a dying breed, where the only place you see them are in special circumstances, like museums, like the National Video Game Museum or the pinball museums, things like that. But also the big thing in the United States right now are barcades, where bars now just have dozens of arcade cabinets, and it just becomes a gimmick to be able to get people in there to spend money. I think that's realistically the end of the dedicated arcade, where you just go there to play games. It's like now you go to a bar which has a bunch of arcade games in, and you drink, and that's where you spend your money, and you get drunk and you spend more money on video games. It's that's kind of the last vestige of arcade gaming here in the States, at least in my experience. You always are going to have amusement parks with arcade games, things like that, but the dedicated ones are gone, and now we're seeing that in Japan because of COVID, because of the losses that companies like Namco, like Taito, like Sega are dealing with because of the lockdowns on these arcades. It's not feasible to have them anymore.
There's something I want to add to that. So, Abdullah, have you ever been to Tokyo?
No, actually.
No. So, Rob, you have been, right?
Yes.
Did you go to one of these Sega arcades?
I went in. I walked around, just kind of took it in, but I did not play in the Sega arcade.
So so you can hopefully back me up on this a little bit. What I'm trying to express to you guys is I see a lot of people saying like, "Oh, this is so sad. It was so cool." Blah blah blah. But the vast majority of people who are saying that have never actually been to one of those Sega arcades. And I'm going to give you guys some tough love here, as the guy who is, that is called Sega's Bay by Sega themselves. Those arcades are really not very good. They're just not.
No.
I think what everybody envisions is they go inside and it's just this like plethora of massive arcade games and these dedicated gamers just sitting there playing and like all these really cool things you can only do in there. And they just imagine this like Las Vegas of video games inside. It's not that. Not even close. The first two floors is almost always exclusively capsule toy machines and those UFO catchers, or what they call it, like, which are just claw machines. You've seen claw machines at like movie theaters and stuff, like just trying to pull out crappy little toys. Granted, the toys there are better, but that's literally 2 of 5 floors. Then you'll hit like 2 floors of video games, most of which is not stuff that you would most likely be interested in playing, to keep it completely real with you. Because most of them are like Japanese exclusive, like things that you like. A lot of them are mahjong and stuff like that. Like a lot of them are really not things you would actually want to play. And then the last floor is usually just like a mini casino with like cigarette smoke everywhere.
Pachinko machines.
Yeah, stuff like that. It's trust me when I say, like, you would probably have a hard time going into one of those, searching all 5 floors and finding anything that would be interesting to your Western taste. I'm just keeping it real with you. It's not like you go in there and they just like have every Sega arcade ever made. In fact,
like, where's the hang on machine?
Yeah, none of that
exist.
None of that is there. None of that is there. It's usually stuff you've.
So it's not the dream. It's not the Dreamland one would say.
No, not even close. Not even close. It on the outside it looks like it, and that's kind of the point. But those Sega arcades, that's the other thing, is they're kind of all over the place, or they were. Like I found multiples, and they're always like that. They're just big open spaces full of stuff that's not really that interesting, and a lot of cigarette smoke, particularly and usually on one floor. And that's not even just down in Akihabara. It's down in in Osaka and other parts of the Tokyo Bay area, even right around the Narita airport. Like that, it's that's all it is. It's not really. It's more like a smoking lounge than it is anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems interesting to know that about Sega. Actually, I'm not sure if you know this, but in Dubai we did have a Sega theme park.
Really?
Oh, really?
When was that?
Yeah, we did. It was in 2009, I think, but it closed down.
You're saying they built a Sega amusement park in 2009?
I think it was in 2009 or something, somewhere in that range.
Was it like a pop-up thing, or was it supposed to be around for a while?
No, it was a full theme park. It was the Sega Republic. It was called, and it was.
Oh, wow, yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Well, I remember
yeah.
Well, I've never even heard of that. That's awesome. Was it awesome, or did it suck?
Yeah, but it was really cool. I remember going there, but I'm not actually sure when it opened here, late 2000s. But it was pretty cool place. But again, it didn't. I'm not sure of the reasons why it failed. But it's no longer there anymore. I do remember going there, and it was full of Sega stuff. And when the things that I've always seen on videos, and I can finally see them there. It's interesting to note that that also didn't work out well here, and since that you said the ones in Japan themselves are not the best. I mean, if the ones in Japan are not the best, then how do you expect the other ones to be better?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's obviously, but so, it kind of this is gonna be a reference that very few people are going to remember because you basically have had to live in either Orlando or Chicago to be aware of it. But I want to ask people out there if they're familiar, or maybe either one of you heard of it, a place called Disney Quest.
No.
Okay, so I forget the exact year. I think it was like 99 to like 2001. Disney made an attempt to build basically like a virtual version of Disney World. And they only built 2 locations. One was in Orlando, which was logical. That's where Disney World itself, or Disney World is there. And the other was in Chicago. And I remember going there a lot. It was this like 8-floor arcade, and it had like, a Cheesecake Factory in it, and it had just like every single floor was like virtual rides and just arcade games galore. And all of the arcade games were made by Sega. Every single one. They had come up with a deal together. So you were playing all these like exclusive Sega games that were only there. In fact, do you remember the Alien Front Online for the Dreamcast? It actually debuted at Disney Quest as a virtual game. Like they would put you in this like rig, and you would get to hold like this big gun, and then put you like a VR set on, and you were playing Alien Front Online basically in a WAN party. LAN party, local area network. You're playing this local area network version of Alien Front Online in a VR set with like a giant light gun and stuff. And they had this like virtual roller coaster thing, and they had all these games that were just exclusive to that. Like that type of experience is what I think people thought is inside those Sega arcades in Japan, but it's not. Those Sega arcades in Japan were basically like 1970s airport lounges. They were just some pachinko machines, gambling stuff, and a lot of cigarette smoke. They weren't good. So it's, and to Abdullah's point kind of about that Sega place failing, it's just like Disney Quest failing. For some reason, it's an oddly expensive business model and just doesn't pan out. And I think it has to do with like probably you need to make up money in directions you're not expecting. So for example, if you look at the one successful arcade model, the two successful arcade models we have left in the United States, Rob already mentioned one, which is the Barcade. You go in there to play the video games, but really they're making all the money off of you buying booze. That's where they're making their money. And then when it comes to the other one, it's things like Dave & Buster's, where you can play all the arcade games, but really they're selling you food. And that's the same model that Chuck E. Cheese uses, except they gain more kids, whereas Dave & Buster's is Chuck E. Cheese for adults. But neither one is dependent upon the games. And that would be the case with Disney Quest. They tried to make something that amazing based just on the video games, and it didn't even come close to working. And I'm sure that at one time the Sega arcades in Japan were like that, but they probably said like, okay, we need to open up to another demographic, and what do we have? Well, we can make money if we sell cigarettes because we're allowed to do that out of like cigarette machines, and then we'll make more money off of gambling devices as opposed to like arcade games where they take like 1/4, or in that case like, you know, maybe 100 yen or whatever it is, 50 yen instead. So that's eventually shifts to that, and then that falls out of form of being interesting, which is where we are now. That's it. That's all I got. So do we want to, before we go here, do we want to say anything else about what this might mean for the future of Sega? Because they are clearly making various corporate shifts.
So, I mean, I think this does follow the trend with Sega, at least in the past couple of years, refocusing attention towards console gaming and towards mobile gaming. Sega, I mean, I think you could probably testify to this, has been doing like a little bit of a PR makeover to try and appeal to retro gamers by reinvigorating old properties, whether that's Panzer Dragoon or Sonic with Sonic Mania, things like that, you know, to try and kind of cash in on this big phenomenon of retro gaming. So possibly them shuttering their arcades might allow them to put more focus, continued focus on console and mobile gaming.
So as someone who has actually, I've worked with them directly multiple times, right? And so I can tell you that there isn't, you're hitting it pretty much the nail on the head. There is a generational shift that's occurred over at Sega that's allowing them to redo PR. The version of Sega we had that was making consoles was a different iteration of Sega entirely. Post consoles, they basically just had corporate ownership that didn't really know what to do with the brand, so they just started looking at the numbers. And what the numbers told them is people like Sonic, I guess, make Sonic stuff and put Sonic in things. And that's why you ended up with, I mean, really, if you think about it, after they closed out the end of the Dreamcast era, and when I say the Dreamcast era, I really mean everything that was under development for the Dreamcast that ended up on other platforms, say the original Xbox that got like Gun Valkyrie, or PS2 that got Virtua Fighter 4, like that was just the tail remnants of the Dreamcast era. But really kind of going into the 7th gen onward, that version of Sega was just like, I don't know what to do, just take Sonic and put him in everything. So you got Sonic, you know, Sonic Unleashed, Sonic 06, yeah. Sonic Boom.
And that's why Sonic went, unfortunately, down in so many things. I mean, they were good games.
There were a few.
I'm not saying that they weren't. But overall, Sonic's been going downhill pretty much.
Yeah, so...
Still going.
Yeah, exactly. So that was kind of their only real focus in there. And they basically just shied away from pretty much anything else. Not because basically just because that version of the company didn't really know what else to do. They were just number guys. But here's the interesting thing. The people who are now in control of Sega again, in fact, the guy, the Japanese dude who just took over at Sega like 2 years ago, grew up on all of it, much like we did. And so the people who are there now, all their PR people, are the guys who are like, dude, I remember Rise Star. I remember Nights into Dreams, you know, and they're focusing more on harvesting all of that and bringing it back into the spotlight. And that's why they're kind of shifting, I think, their business model a lot to embrace the nostalgia, to kind of the point we started with the beginning of this podcast with Nintendo. Nintendo has the most valuable IPs in video games. Sega, for every Nintendo IP that was created, Sega made an alternative to it. It's just that Sonic was really the only one that kind of broke through that, glass ceiling and became part of the cultural zeitgeist. But to Sega fans, there are a lot of those there. They've just kind of laid dormant. So modern Sega is embracing a lot of them more now.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
If Sega starts to utilize its nostalgic, utilize the nostalgia that it holds with so many people, it can go somewhere.
Precisely.
Yeah, I mean, look at Sega over the past 2 years. You've gotten new hardware from Sega. You've got in the forms of the Game Gear Micro and the Sega Genesis Mini. You've gotten revivals of games from Streets of Rage, Sonic Mania, Toe Jam and Earl, which isn't a Sega property, but it basically, was a Sega exclusive for most of its life.
Shenmue 3.
Shenmue 3.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. I got
games.
sick for a second.
It's basically you're seeing, kind of like a renaissance of Sega properties, which keeps kind of growing and growing, and who knows what's gonna I believe it was one of the heads of Sega Japan joked. He says for our next mini console, I'd love to do either a Dreamcast or an SG-1000 Mini, which is absolutely hilarious.
I hated that article, by the way, because
I know
what happened with that is this. All right, just so everybody's clear, there's not a Dreamcast Mini coming. That is not a thing. It's ludicrous, but
they think it'd be cool, right?
Yeah, basically this dude who was helping with the Game Gear Micro, they just asked him hey, what would you want to do next? And he just goes Dreamcast or SG-1000. I don't know, and that doesn't have any power. It's not a thing that's in development, but people ran with it as Sega says Dreamcast Mini is next, and it's not even close to true. And I can't tell you how many arguments I had with people on my YouTube channel sending me links being like, yep, it's coming, you're wrong. I'm like, it's literally all citing back to the same guy who has no control over this. Again, you're talking to a guy who has now been working with Sega directly for 2 years, me. And incidentally, that's about the exact same time that you're crediting with them being good. So it's obviously all for me. Come on. I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding. But my point with all of this is, you're absolutely right. Sega is doing a renaissance, and basically the reason for that is the people who are in power there now did grow up with Sega in their golden era. And the version of Sega we have now embraces their fans for contributions on what to do to appeal to the other fans. As I said, they now reach out to people like me all the time, be like, what should we do with this brand? What do you think of this? Would this be a good idea? And I'm not saying that they're sitting here and be like, oh, we're going to have boardroom meetings and we're going to invite that nerd from Chicago to our meeting to make decisions. It's nothing like that. It's just like they want opinions from us, and then they actually use them in what they're going to do, which is not the version of Sega we had even 5 years ago. The version of Sega we had 5 years ago was, all right, our big surprise announcement is a new soccer game. That was a different era, and that era finally is over. Now, people might take this too far and think we're saying, oh, but that means Sega is making a new console. They are absolutely not making a new console. It's not a thing. Absolutely not. But they are focusing their efforts now on console games, because they now have a proven track record with another franchise that isn't Sonic for the first time, which is Yakuza. Yakuza comes out, and it's actually a big deal now. And I remember when Yakuza was out there, and they were not even sure if we would see the next one because it was a flop franchise in the West. How far that has come is ridiculous. And it's genuinely a great thing, because you can actually go to your friends who didn't grow up on Sega. Maybe they were Nintendo people, or they're older, or maybe they're people who are just starting gaming, or they've only been doing it for the last few years, or even kids who have no real idea what Sega's history is because of that era where they mostly went silent. You can show them Yakuza and instantly introduce them to what Sega is. When I was still working with Game Society pimps, they both of my guys there did not grow up on Sega stuff at all. They knew, like, one of them didn't even know who Sonic was. He thought he was Felix the cat. He thought they were the same character, which says a lot. But I had them play Yakuza 0, and within like a half hour, they're like, this is the greatest franchise thing I've ever played. It's just ridiculous. The storylines it has are insane. It's funny. It's entertaining. It's just great. So that's the great introductory, low-hanging fruit way to teach people what Sega is about. And then from there, you can be like, oh, by the way, they've been around for 60 years, and here's all the awesome stuff they did. There you go.
Yep. Well, being a huge Sonic fan myself, I would love Sega to focus or to at least. I mean, as you just said, they now just don't have Sonic's not not the only thing that they have now. But speaking as a Sonic fan, I would say that I hope that I mean, with the current trends that we're seeing going with Sega, I would hope that they would actually do some things that are effective and good, and for the Sonic franchise, at least get back the audience who lost faith in the Sonic series, for example, and in general get back the trust of many fans.
I think
who may have lost.
I think Sonic Mania probably did a lot to help with that.
That's actually one of the.
Yeah, what was that other one they put out? Not what was it? Sonic
Forces.
Yeah, Sonic Forces.
Yeah, that was not good.
Yeah, I beat that game in like 3 hours. It was
very
short.
Very easy.
Yeah,
very easy.
That game I feel was hopefully basically the last remnant of that previous era of Sega. I mean, I liked Sonic Team Racing. Some people would argue that. I mean, you kind of have to argue that was really the last Sonic remnant of that era because it started development back then. But then again, so did Sonic Mania. But Sonic Mania was independently developed and just kind of officially produced by Sega. And that's another thing that Sega does now is any one of you out there, just so you're aware, if you're a game developer and you're like, dude, I loved X franchise, whether it's Rystar or it's Nights into Dreams or Burning Rangers, whatever it is, there is a difference now between Sega and Nintendo and these other, and perhaps Sony and Microsoft to a lesser extent. If you were to sit down and be like, I absolutely love Metroid, Nintendo's not making a Metroid game, I'm going to make my own, and I'm going to try and push it out there, Nintendo will come after you with all their lawyers. If you go out there and make a new Burning Rangers game and present it to Sega, not release it, but present it to Sega, they're very willing to be like, that's great. We're going to give you some extra cash. You're going to finish it up, and this is going to be an official release. That's how
Sonic Mania is a kind of similar.
That's literally the example I'm talking about. That's what happened with Sonic Mania.
Yeah.
That's what happened with Streets of Rage 4. Exactly. There are more games like that in development I can't talk about, but there are other games like that exist. This is not even a secret. There is an official Sega channel to go ahead and propose stuff, assuming you're like legit, like you actually prove that you can do this work and you are doing that work. Official Sega channels allows you to submit this to them, and if they like it for review, they'll be like, all right, you got a deal. We'll make this. That's another reason that Panzer Dragoon is getting the remake. Sega is in a position where they're embracing their past, but they're also allowing people to make games for them, and it's a nice renaissance, as Rob said. It is a nice renaissance.
So I can't wait for Adam to propose making McDonald Treasureland Adventures 2 Electric Boogaloo.
As great as that would be, you would need McDonald's on board with that. Actually, no joke. That's why that game was not on the Genesis Mini.
Yeah.
Because Treasure was involved, but McDonald's was not. So that's why you never got that.
Yeah.
But it was considered. I'm not even joking. The game was actually originally on the list at one point.
That would have been great.
Yeah, but I don't know. Obviously, I don't know the specifics of it, but I'm assuming it just comes down to like McDonald's wanted a bigger cut of the release than Sega would have been willing to allow. Which is kind of a fair assessment, I think, because McDonald's is a strange. Not that we're talking about this now, but do you know that McDonald's is more of a real estate company than they are a burger company?
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? If you don't know what we're talking about, there's entire videos on this. This is a video game podcast, so we don't need to talk about that, but it is bizarre. But anyway, anything else you guys want to say on this Sega subject?
I think that basically we've talked about the whole thing from all aspects. I guess I don't think there's much more to say. But we just, I mean, personally, I would say I hope that Sonic gets back on his foot again. Honestly, that's what I do hope that comes from Sega.
Yeah, and I for one cannot wait for the announcement of the Sega Terra Drive Mini.
Oh yeah, it's inevitable.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. Terra Drive Mini, 2021. It's inevitable. They don't even know what a Terra Drive is, dude. I just did a video about it too. I promise you, they're like, "What the hell is he talking about?"
Anyway,
it's funny. So I did a video on those like obscure Sega consoles, right? That video was actually Sega asked me to make that. That's where things are with Sega, by the way. Not just for me, but for other people. They go out to people and they're like, we're doing this cool history of our, thing. And they approach YouTubers and they're like, do you want to celebrate with us? As opposed to somebody like Nintendo where I'm like, hey guys, check it out. There's a new Mario game. All right, banned. Your channel shut down for how dare you celebrate our history. It's like the exact polar opposite of philosophy. But anyway, so I did this video for them on part of the Go Sega campaign. And I talked about the Terra Drive, and I got a comment from a guy who says, you forgot the Sega IBM computer. I'm like, are you talking about the Sega Terra Drive? He's like, I don't call it that. I'm like, but okay. like I didn't forget it. You just don't know what it's called. So like,
I mean, IBM was built, built the Terra Drive, but it is a Sega.
Yeah,
it's called the Terra Drive.
But no, it was just funny. Like I could show you the comment later, but it was just a funny discussion because he was just like, I don't call them that. It's like I don't call computers. I call them Windows, and I'm like, okay, so he's just weird. But whatever. So. Point is, yes, the Terra Drive Mini definitely coming out. It's going to be a surprise release right after Christmas. That's what's going to even make it crazier. It's going to come out right after Christmas. Mark my words. It's a done deal. But anything else on this, guys?
That's it.
I think that's it.
You know what they need to make? The what? Sega Nomad Jumbo. Why do we have to keep going mini?
I just picture like a full-size Genesis with just like an LCD screen on it.
Did you? It's basically
I'd buy
it's
that.
Basically just a giant like 55-inch television with like a big plastic molding around it with giant buttons. That's we're calling it the Nomad Jumbo. That's got to be the next thing. Because Nintendo has to do all these things first. I don't want to see the N64 Mini. I want to see N64 Jumbo. Make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Change the trend a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
From mini to...
Yeah, Nintendo gets to create the trends. That's the rule. Actually, no, not with the N64. N64 should still be mini. It's got to be Game Boy Jumbo. There you go.
Game Boy Jumbo.
Game Boy Jumbo. And you're welcome, Nintendo.
Maybe Game Boy Micro Jumbo.
Yeah, Micro. Oh, Game Boy Micro Jumbo. It's just like a normal size.
It's just the Game Boy.
There you go, everybody. There's our $1 billion idea that none of us will see a cent for. So, with that, I want to thank you guys very much for listening. I want to thank Leafy for that particular subject. Abdullah, of course, as always, want to thank you for being on here. I look forward to having you here next time as well. Shout outs to you'll definitely be here. Eduardo Cruz, Michael Kelly, Luis Bonilla, Joseph Tamburino, and Trey Wagner, as well as Caleb Bravo for his subject as well. Thank you, Rob, I guess, for still being here. And a reminder, if you want to keep Rob, that's an option. It's literally, it's kind of a voting system, honestly. You vote with your wallet. Is Rob worth your money? $1 right now would keep Rob. $1.
Forget the actual election. The election of me through Patreon is too close to call.
Yeah,
and I need your support.
We got to get those mail-in Patreon.
It's the mail-in Patreon balance.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry, we're not really being political, guys. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke.
It's going to take 2 weeks to reach you guys.
All right. Well, in all seriousness, thank you everybody for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, and all that great stuff. Social media things in the description. Thank you again to Rob and Abdullah, and we'll see you all later.